So I guess questions from the audience. Guess the woman in the back.
All right, so my question's mostly for Bob Williams, and it speaks to the point that Professor Freeman raised about the regional economic development strategy, which we've tried several times over the years to lift off the ground with not very much success at all. Can you comment on that in terms of if it's needed, where is it, or what's your perspective on that?
It's certainly needed, and various ones of us have tried. Larry Campbell was sympathetic to it when we looked at it, and so on. But it's a neat question. You know, most of we have a small one here in Vancouver that is less than adequate. The problem with many of these agencies is that they're not the right kind of creative people and with the capacity that's needed. And we have municipalities here that are so opposed to this kind of thing, like Burnaby. I mean, Burnaby is the hole in the donut in this region. It really is. It's just not as alive as it could and should be, and it plays such a negative role within the grander region. So, yes, we should have it, and yes, it should be talented, but you know, the province generally looks at the outer regions as the ones that they'll spend time with and feel that Vancouver and this region is adequately handled. It's not, but it requires very high levels of skill and talent, and I think it's just a hell of a challenge.
Question from the back?
My question is about moral courage. And where does that come from? Why does it take you to retire before you start? Oh, maybe, I mean, we just didn't witness you in your splendor while you were in public office, but where is moral courage these days? And where should it come from? Is it civic organizations? Is it academia? But within public service in particularly, where is the moral courage for public good? This is for everybody. This is not just for take it personal.
You know, in earlier days, people used to think that elections were a time when there could be a grand dialogue and real information you know, and the hard reality is they're 32-day wonders that are totally manipulative and where all memories are almost lost. So the great challenge is for us to educate ourselves as a people and to see and think about what's important. But a lot of it is just jingoism that elects us, including me, in ancient times.
Bit of a stretch metaphor, but I think it might be helpful. People who live in a golden age are usually the ones going around complaining how yellow everything is. And it's the same with leadership. It's something you say, now they were leaders back in the day. Boy, that guy was a hero. Didn't treat him like that when she was raising hell or not. So it's perspective. Where does moral leadership? It comes from each of you. God. Now, who will emerge as the leader is the question. Who will have that charismatic capability? Who will be able to put together the machine, the levers, so that others will follow? That's the question. And I'm sure waiting suspected any day now, once the young ones put down the screens, because it has to happen. It has to. Leadership will emerge in the face. Well, no, that doesn't have to happen, does it? Fortunate examples of that.
The apparatchiks are in control.
Yeah.
That's part of the problem.
But in the face of catastrophe, yes, leadership will emerge. So, you know, it's apocalyptic, and that doesn't go anywhere. Catastrophism is no way to sell an agenda. You want to jump in on this, Gary?
It's always nice to be on a panel with two politicians. But I don't know. To say the public servants are supposed to be neutral. It's supposed to be professional, but you definitely, and you have to you serve many political masters. But there are a principled public servant can have a big influence on events, and keeping that balance of you have we all have, public servants all, I think most of us vote. We have our own values. We own our own political beliefs. But we're able to craft. We're advisors. We provide advice. We can shape, and we can point out consequences. We can bring different values and interests into a conversation. But you always have to remember that we're appointed and they're elected. These guys, they go. I got a 37-year career, and I only had to apply for my job once. They have to go to the polls every 4 years and be validated. And there's a certain, there's a respect that you have to have for a democratic process and the people that you report to ultimately.
Moral courage may not be necessarily heroic. Look at the example that's been used already. Bob has reference to 1948, and my reference and your follow-up with the creation of the Lower Mainland Regional Planning Board. There you had a catastrophe, the flood, and a wily politician, someone you might least expect, maybe the only one who can, Tom MacDonald. You had smart, strategic public servants. I presume there was even heroic leadership at the time of the flood, and then there was certainly the follow-through for the succession of leaders at the regional level. So you put all those pieces together, and here we are.
But at the same time, I'm sorry to say this, but it's a really neat question in terms of the public service. The reason that early administration in the 70s did as much as it did, and it was enormous, is because there virtually wasn't a public service. W.A.C. Bennett didn't believe in it, the guy that had been there for 20 years. And you found that all the deputy ministers were essentially people that started as mail clerks, and they all rose to the top. And I was ready to scream into a vault in terms of the lack of capacity of the deputy ministers when I, as a young planner, walked in the door after being on city council here and experienced this work. And I literally yelled into a vault for a period for no longer than a week. And then it finally hit me because I was a bit of a slow learner. My God, there's nobody in our way. Because the truth of the matter is that most of the public service wants to warn you against doing something because it's so problematic, Minister. That's the truth of the way the system is managed. And because there were hardly any of them, we achieved more in a few short years than happened in a decade. So, the contrarian in me just has to tell the truth.
If I may say something, in response to this discussion. If we are sitting here in a very privileged location, isolated from the city, surrounded by beautiful woods, and talking to each other. So we have to move out. I think one of the things that I would envision is a series of regional seminars in which we would invite people to come from the region, from the local region that we happen to have the seminar in, and see what they have to say. Here we're advocates of a regional perspective, but that's a top-down view of things, because we are sitting on top in many meanings of that term, top. Income, position, university, and all of that. So I think we need to democratize this whole process and get more voices from the people who are not being heard. And you spoke very eloquently about that. So because this is not the 1970s when there are no obstacles. There are plenty of obstacles in the way, and there are structures already in place. So to break through these structures, you have to work from the bottom up and create publics that will advocate for them for another perspective.
Matthew?
First off, thank you to the panelists and to John. I really enjoyed what happened earlier this evening. But this is a really great jumping off point for my question, which is, outside of this room and ones like it, there's sort of this idea that we have, which is that regionalism is an unpopular idea because it's not well known. But what if, say, we carry out these regional seminars or some sort of outreach activity and find out that people genuinely don't like the ideas?
One interesting thing is, we talk about regions. Regions are always the uncomfortable level of government. This sits between municipalities and the province. And so everybody, municipal politicians who sit on the board are always suspicious of what the regional board is doing. And I think you find the public are a bit bemused because they don't know what the region is doing. And I think to illustrate that dilemma, the capital region, which I think is actually an extremely well-run organization, but you wouldn't find that in the Times Colonist. You get the opposite. But they do regular surveys about their functions and what they do. So they ask the public, well, what do you think of the regional park system? Oh, 90% rating. What do you think of the water system? 90%. What do you think about growth management? 90%. What do you think about the CRD? 30%. So it's the problem of being a wholesale organization as opposed to a retail organization. You're not on the street. You're back. And how do you? So to go out and talk about regionalism, in abstract, I think is fruitless. But to talk about the kind of issues that John has presented, in my region, about emergency management, economic development, a sewage treatment plant, the first. Those are that's where the dialogue. It's through the issues that matter to people, then to get the connection back to the organization.
But the macro-regional idea is long overdue. The people on that island, Vancouver Island, could govern that island as well as the provincial government. And the whole business of forestry and natural resources and recreation and water and so on can well be managed. And if you, a team of us went out a summer or two ago through the interior, that vote drought place that shows up on my maps. And the residents there, in terms of local control around forestry and natural resources, was enormous. Our productivity in the natural resource sector and forestry in particular is probably about a third of that of Sweden. It is dismal. Our capacity in management in the private sector in forestry is dismal. And the people out there begin to know and understand that. And the whole idea of freeing them to use their enterprise and skill and apply it on their land base excites the hell out of them when you really put it to them that way.
Naomi?
I'd like to really thank the panel, particularly for their refreshing language. Gordon, thank you for moral hypocrisy. Bob, thank you for the gravy train. I think that as we academics would say, that's a classical political economy analysis, and you made it very visceral and very, very understandable, and so I think it's really refreshing to bring that into this, the sort of the preciousness of the campus. When we talk about when you, Gordon, talk about moral hypocrisy and the city of Vancouver as the greenest city versus what we're actually doing, which is becoming the carbon trading capital of North America. I think that's a very powerful way of putting it. But then what I really worry about is that Bob then invokes the Sawasan as doing these vile things on their newly acquired treaty lands. And I wonder whether we're not just morally hypocritical in holding the Sawasan First Nation to higher standards than we hold any other urban developers. So that's one point.
I thought they were holding themselves to a higher standard.
And so where the Sawasan are not here to talk about why they're doing what they're doing, and I think we need to understand why First Nations are becoming urban land developers.
Oh, I get
so all of the points that you make, or people have made about we're at a turning point, we're at this critical turning point. We're also at a turning point in the role of First Nations as actors in the urban development process, and I think that's just not really well understood at the moment. That kind of hit the headlines last week with the new big land deal between the Aquilini, the Squamish, the Musqueam, and these are things that are not even being talked about yet.
So let's talk about them. Let's have them in the room. I have no problem with that. And I certainly think it's terrific that they're getting into urban land development. I quite look forward to Jericho. They're going to be able to do things that politically are not possible. What I expect is that they will be consistent with their rhetoric, their beliefs of being stewards, thinking generationally, of establishing, in fact, new standards and new ways of building, consistent with their roots and beliefs. Sawasan Mills ain't it.
There's a fundamental equity question around this land question for us all, as I've suggested. A 24-fold increase in a dozen years in Surrey. And the bulk of it primarily to one ethnic group who had small holdings in Surrey, Indo-Canadians. Well, bless them. And so with the others. But then at the broadest level, we have to think, well, what about equity overall? Don't we have to apply some new kinds of standards, new kinds of rules in order to share that wealth, this land underneath our feet? And I think the answer is yes. Instead of continuing to just pile new increments that are not earned funds at all, that are huge increments from the land base. And our politicians puzzle on how we're going to pay for the infrastructure and everything. Well, we've been giving it all away in terms of that purse. We have to rethink that purse and how it's distributed in a fair way. And I think that applies on band lands as well as non-band lands.
Bring back Henry George, I say.
I'm sorry?
Bring back Henry George.
Well, you get agreement for me.
Well, thank you, everybody. We've actually reached the end and a little bit more than our team has.
So we want to actually also acknowledge John, whose birthday it is tomorrow. As a real reflection of Vancouver, we have candles, but we couldn't find anybody who had a lighter.
Is it a layer cake?